After breaking up with Ken, I ended up with his younger uncle, Dave. We got married and the two families became close. 2 years later, our child was born. Meanwhile, Ken spent 5 years abroad chasing after his crush, but eventually gave up and returned home. When we met again, he was mesmerized by the sight of me and his uncle's daughter. "Hey, this kid looks a lot like you when you were young. She even looks a bit like me," he said. I was stunned for a second, then laughed. "That's because she's my and your uncle's daughter. She should call you cousin." Ken was instantly hurt. "You loved me so much back then. How could you end up with someone else?" I calmly took my daughter from his arms. "Mr. Ken, why bring up our well-known past again?" While the whole family was setting up for Betty's birthday party, the housekeeper rushed over. "The young master is back." My mother-in-law looked confused. "Which young master? Who's back?" "It's young Master Ken," the housekeeper said, glancing at the old man, then lowering his head. "Ken really came back?" My sister-in-law stepped forward. "Ken is her son. She nearly became my mother-in-law once upon a time. That brat still knows how to come home? Finally had enough fun outside?" The old man was a bit angry as he headed towards the door. Ken was kneeling there and shouted "Grandpa" when he saw the old man. Using a cane, the old man snapped, "How dare you come back? Do you realize you almost brought shame to our family?" "Grandpa, I know I was wrong. I've realized everything now. I won't cause trouble over a woman again," Ken pleaded desperately. He glanced at his mom. "Mom, please ask Grandpa and Grandma to let me in. I really know I was wrong." My sister-in-law hesitated. Dave, Betty, and I stood far from the door but could barely hear what was happening. Betty, her mouth filled with a lollipop, whispered to me, "Mom, why don't we go over there?" Dave and I exchanged glances, not saying a word. It's all a bit awkward given my current role with Ken. I imagine he wouldn't be thrilled knowing a woman who was almost his fiancée ended up marrying his uncle. Dave patted Betty's head. "No rush. We're saving the best for last, making it worse for the one kneeling. Let him get a good scolding first, then he'll break down." I smiled at Dave. He's quite mischievous. I thought he shared my awkwardness, but he's just having fun planning a surprise for his nephew. "Dad, who's the guy kneeling?" "I've never seen him before." Betty circled around Dave and me, constantly moving. "He's a stranger, sweetie. Just call him brother later," I said. Betty asked, "Why call him brother? He doesn't look anything like you." "Oh, you're saying he doesn't look as young as me?" Dave teased. Betty nodded. Dave laughed even harder. "Right, he's older and can't see well." "That's enough," I said, trying not to laugh. "Dad and Mom might scold you again if they hear this." "I just think I'm younger, more handsome, and a better fit for you," Dave protested. "Should I look up your birth dates on Wikipedia to see who's actually younger?" I joked. "You don't get it. The key is having a young mindset," Dave said, adjusting his tie. "Good thing I wore my suit today. Can't be outdone by him." "Let's make our grand entrance as a family," Dave said, carrying our child over. I had no choice but to go along with him. As Ken knelt and tried to apologize to the elders, he instinctively called out "Uncle" when he saw Dave. He kept staring at the child in Dave's arms. "Uncle, whose child is this? Are you married now?" No one knew which country Ken had been in all those years. After chasing his crush overseas, no amount of family money or connections could locate him. So, he probably had no clue about anything happening back home or people's current lives. "Of course, I'm married. Otherwise, whose child would I be holding?" Dave laughed, teasing him. Ken stared at Betty. "She looks like someone I know." The whole family went silent. I walked over to Dave, standing beside him as Betty reached for me. "Mom." Ken followed her gaze and was frozen in place upon seeing me. In disbelief, he got up, refusing to believe I was Betty's mom. Amy, is this child, you, he stuttered, unwilling to finish his sentence. I smiled at him. She's mine and your uncle's daughter, Betty. We've been married 5 years, and she's 4 years old. I patted Betty's head. Betty, call him cousin. Dave is Ken's actual uncle, only 5 years older. So, by family protocol, she should call him cousin. Ken looked devastated. This can't be real. Amy, how can you be with my uncle? Are you two pulling some kind of prank on me? What prank? By rank, you should call Amy aunt. Stop with the pitiful look. The old man tapped his cane on the floor. This can't be happening. Ken suddenly shouted. How could it be like this? Everything's upside down now. Amy was almost my fiancée. How could she end up marrying my uncle? The ancient times are long gone, but you're still so old-fashioned, Dave smirked, clearly enjoying himself. You say less, don't stir things up. The old man scolded Dave. Okay, Dad. Dave responded, then smiled like a villain showing off his treasures. I found him more and more childish. Amy, can you tell me if it's true? Ken looked pretty defeated as he turned his gaze back to me. If you want, you can call me Auntie, given our family ties. I said calmly. I looked at Ken. It's been 5 years since we last saw each other. He's not the same dashing guy he used to be. His skin's not great, and the stubble on his chin makes him look older. His hairstyle isn't doing him any favors either. Staring at him, it was easy to recall the events from 5 years ago. Back then, it was half an hour before the engagement ceremony, and we were all waiting on Ken. My mom was standing there, trying to calm me down, telling me not to worry. But then, Ken's call shattered everyone. Word by word, he said. Amy, I've thought it over, and we're just not right for each other. I really love Nina, I can't live without her. Even if she's with another guy, I still love her. I'm sorry, I can't lie to myself. I'm going to follow her abroad. Oh, and delete my number. I'm about to board, tossing the SIM card in the trash. Don't contact me. I was frozen. Then Ken's mom took the phone. What are you talking about, Ken? Are you crazy? The ceremony is in half an hour, and now you're bailing? What are we supposed to do? All she got in response was the call getting disconnected. Everyone just stood there in silence. My mom couldn't speak, busy wiping my tears. I never thought Ken and I would end like this. I also never realized he never actually liked me. He always loved someone else. Even if she dumped him, humiliated him, and married another guy, he wanted to chase her abroad. That's got to be true love, right? But this true love left both our families embarrassed. Both of our families are well known in Hong Kong. Almost every tabloid was at the engagement party today. Tabloids are dramatic, and society is even harsher on women. I couldn't imagine how the news would paint me if Ken didn't show up at the ceremony. I'd be the perfect target. While everyone was in a panic, Dave suddenly rushed into the dressing room, locking eyes with me. Amy, he said in front of everyone, I'll get engaged to you. The news was that our families were going to be related, and since I'm Ken's family, this engagement works too. The reporters can't find fault with that. We'll just have to get anything with Ken's name removed. Change up the MC's speech. No big deal, let's do this. I hesitated for a moment, but seeing Dave's sincerity, I agreed. I turned away from Ken. We were already in the past, it was over. Tell me, Amy, did you trick me? How could you be with my uncle? Ken let out a bitter laugh. You all knew I was coming back, right? So you set this up, to teach me a lesson and make me regret it, right? He stared at his grandpa. Grandpa, was this your plan? I'm sorry now. Please, stop this play. Nobody answered him. Ken acted all crazy, coming up to me, eyeing Betty. Amy, look. They really found a good young actress. This little girl is like you when you were little, she even looks a bit like me. I paused, then replied. Ken, this is my and your uncle's daughter, so of course, she looks like me. And she doesn't look like you at all. She looks like her dad, your uncle. The only reason she might look like you is because, well, your family. Dave was eyeing Ken. Oh, now you're here to take someone else's kid because your chase didn't work out? Is my and Amy's daughter cute and pretty to you? No. She can't be Amy's daughter. Ken smashed his phone on the floor. You all fooled me together? Do you think that's fun? His tantrum was as childish now as 5 years ago. Today was Betty's 4th birthday, and no one but his sister-in-law wanted to humor him. No one even had time to watch him throw a fit. His granddad gave him a disappointed glance. Ken, you let me down. 5 years and you've not changed at all. With that, he left with Grandma. His sister-in-law kept telling Ken to move on and reiterated that Betty really was my and Dave's daughter. Everyone else left the old house, busy setting up the event. Ken's family estate had 3 parts, taking up half a hillside. It's quiet and ultra-valuable in space-tight Hong Kong. In the middle is where his granddad and grandma live, to the left is his sister-in-law's home, and the right is where Dave, Betty, and I live. Between the homes is some distance, with fountains, pools, a rose garden, and professionally designed landscapes. Betty's birthday party was set up in the rose garden, inviting loads of family, friends, and business partners we're close to. I went over to set up a play area near the garden just for the kids. I was already pretty busy, but of course, Ken had to come over and bug me. Amy, you liked me so much back then. I can't believe that just 5 years later, you've completely moved on. Did you get with my uncle just for the family? Ken suddenly spoke up, catching me off guard. I looked at him, totally baffled. I really regret pushing you to marry someone just because. I'd been abroad for 5 years and finally realized you're the one who truly loves me and was good to me. Imagine how happy we'd be if I didn't run away from the wedding back then. Ken asked, sounding all pleading, if you agree to divorce, let's get back together. How about it? I looked at Ken. Oh, is Nina done with you now, so you're back to find me? You see me happy and married, and it bothers you? I said, Ken, am I some kind of trash can? Ken's face turned sour. He never realized his limitations and was always full of confidence. It was honestly ridiculous. Mr. Ken, I spoke calmly, stop joking around and bothering me. It's been 5 years. It's absurd to think I still have feelings for you. Dave and I are inseparable now. We're together not for the family's sake, but because we love each other. You're a stranger to me now. I'm not interested in anything you propose, so please stop bothering me. I returned to Betty's birthday party. She turned 4 this year, full of energy and curiosity about everything. Mom. Mom. Betty ran to me. Where did you go? I missed you so much even though you were just gone for a couple of minutes. Pick me up. Everyone around was smiling lovingly at Betty. My best friend Wendy, who adores kids, said, our Betty is so adorable, I wish I could take her home. Well, why not have one yourself then, Wendy? A kid from you too would be so cute, a guest chimed in. Wendy forced a smile, work is more important right now. I'm not in a rush, I have a lot to handle at the moment. I quickly changed the subject, pushing Betty towards her. Betty, let your aunt take a look at you. She adores you. I love Auntie too, Betty beamed. Oh, my Betty, said Wendy's aunt, hugging her tight, I went to your house the other day and talked with your grandma. How come I didn't see you? I wanted to go with Grandpa because he had a meeting, so he took me, Betty explained. Wow, the lady expressed surprise, your grandpa used to be all about work, and now he's taking you to meetings too. Betty climbed down, grabbing the lady's hand, leading her to see the ecological fish pond we built at home. She happily went along. I finally exhaled in relief. If she stayed longer, she might bring up the news about Wendy that I wished to avoid. Don't worry, Wendy smiled at me nonchalantly, I've got a strong mind. I won't get upset or influenced by others. Our marriage might not work out. Divorce is likely. So why have kids? Wendy forced another smile. We're not like you and Dave, truly in love. Why bother with kids? For them to just suffer after a divorce? Sighing, I held Wendy's hand. Whatever decision you make, I'll support you. Divorce isn't always an end, it could be a new beginning. Finally, the most awaited moment arrived. Dave and I cut the cake with Betty, sharing it with our guests. The afternoon rolled by, and the birthday party came to an end. After seeing off the last guests, I searched everywhere for Dave and Betty but found nothing. Amy, Ken and Dave got into a fight. You should come quick. Ken's mom rushed over. Surprised, I hurried with her. By the time I reached the hot spring, both of them were wrestling on the ground. Ken, why are you fighting with your uncle? It's Betty's birthday today. What's gotten into you? My mother-in-law scolded. Grandma, don't come over here. I don't want you to get hurt. Ken said, throwing another punch at Dave's face. Dave, how could you take advantage of someone? Marrying Amy, is it a joke or what? Stop it. I stepped between them. Ken let go of Dave. I handed Dave a tissue, feeling more upset as I saw the bruise on his face. You okay, Dave? How did this even start? Ken stood there, looking shocked. You're seriously standing up for him? Amy, why are you so good to him? I couldn't believe it. I showed Ken the wedding ring on my finger. Why shouldn't I stand up for my husband? Who else would I protect, if not him? Don't pay attention to him. Dave said, blocking Ken from my view. Ken's just acting crazy. I was with Betty watching dragonflies when he suddenly rushed over, asking why I married you. I ignored him and he started fighting, dragged me into the pond. I barely climbed out, then he punched me again. I looked at Dave, covered in mud and water. Where's Betty? Where did she go? I looked around but couldn't find Betty. Suddenly, she came running out from the flower path with tears on her face, crashing into my arms. Mommy, I couldn't find you. That guy is scary. Ken showed a glimpse of pain, staring intensely at Betty. I hugged Betty tight. Don't be scared, sweetheart. Not wanting her to have a trauma, I fibbed. They weren't really fighting, Betty. They were just practicing wrestling. Want Auntie to take you back to the room? I'll come get you for a snack soon. Betty nodded. I handed her to the maid to take back to the room. Once Betty left, Ken's mom came and slapped him in the face. What's wrong with you? Ken, will you ever grow up? Can't you just behave? Ken, holding his cheek, looked incredibly surprised. Even you side with Dave, Mom? What makes him so special? Is he more noble than me? Shut up. After all you did back then, you shouldn't even talk like that. The old man stood by. Ken, don't think coming back on your own means no punishment. Go kneel at the ancestral hall now. Ken didn't move. You dared to run away on your wedding day for some woman. Did you ever think where that left Amy? What shame it brought on the family. You left Amy at the altar and now question why she's with your uncle. How can you even face this? Ken suddenly laughed. Grandpa, you protect Dave because he's your son while I'm just your grandson. The old man clutched his chest, furious. Grandma helped him back to his room. Ken started provoking us when the old man left. Bang, Ken's sister-in-law gave him a slap. Enough embarrassment. Go back now. Ken stood there for a long time but eventually walked off silently. Sister-in-law, looking guilty, walked over to me and Dave. Amy, Dave, it was Ken acting stupid today. I apologize on his behalf. After he gets punished tonight, I'll make him apologize too. Later, I'll check on Betty to see if she was scared. Sister-in-law, Dave sighed. You really need to control Ken. Honestly, I wanted to hit back. He's lucky he's my nephew. Look at this custom suit I just got, and now it's ruined. I knew he was going to milk it for something. And, of course, he did. Dave, list anything that got damaged, sister-in-law said, feeling worse. I'll cover it. After she left, I looked at Dave, who was a bit too pleased with himself. Enough with the poor me act. Dave chuckled but tried to hide it. Me? Pretend? I'm seriously injured. After a while, when I ignored him, Dave confessed, all right. Ken's hits are just surface bruises. Mine aren't visible. He had it coming, picking a fight for no reason. Needed a lesson. But, Dave hesitated, Ken does hit hard. Almost got me. I need to work out, avoid that midlife spread. I rolled my eyes at Dave. You working out for a fight of all things? Let's check on Betty. Entering Betty's room, she was bouncing on the bed. When she saw me, she ran over like a little penguin. Mommy, did you see? I was practicing wrestling too. Daddy was like a slippery eel, all muddy. Daddy looked so cool. One day I'll protect you both. Seeing Betty all happy was a relief. Thank God she bought my story. If there was lasting trauma, I'd hunt Ken down and slap him myself. Later that evening, I came downstairs from the study. Ken was in the living room, talking to Betty. Does your dad treat you well? For sure. Mom and Dad love me most, and I love them too. She reminded Ken seriously. Big brother, you lost today. Grandpa scolded you, and Dad didn't get scolded. Ken knelt to look Betty in the eye. I did lose, I lost your mom. Ken. I got so angry. Covering Betty's ears, I shouted, what are you saying in front of a child? Are you crazy? Ken stood, pain in his eyes as he looked back and forth between me and Betty. She really looks like you, just like when you were young. Amy, if we hadn't split up, our kid would probably look like this, right? Ken said. Dave came in from another room and caught what Ken was saying. You kidding? Dave walked up to Ken. You don't deserve to be my uncle, Ken shot back, holding his ground. I told Betty to go play with her blocks in her room. She happily agreed and bounced away. She's so lively, nothing like I was as a kid. Looking at Ken's face full of resentment, I felt a bit sorry for him. He didn't have to act this way, it only made him look silly. I remember when we first got together, Nina hadn't gone abroad yet. She would say she didn't love Ken and wanted him to stay away, yet she'd keep stringing him along. She'd text him if she got hurt unexpectedly. She'd call him when she was down. She even called him when she got drunk at a bar. That was her game to keep him hooked and try winning him back. Once, she dumped Ken for hiding his true identity. Later, when his family introduced him to the media, Nina regretted it and tried to get him back, seeing him as a catch. Ken wasn't blind to it, but he was all too willing to play along. On his birthday, we all celebrated, but halfway through, he left because Nina texted. On our dates, he'd rush off if Nina sent a drunken message, going to her straight away. During a company product launch, he was all over the place because he heard Nina got hurt. When I confronted Ken, he'd brush it off and then try to soothe me. I really don't love her anymore, truly. I'm not lying. But, Amy, you gotta give me some time to fully move on, right? Don't worry, it's just concern for Nina, nothing more. We're supposed to be partners in life, Amy. Constant suspicion isn't good, you need to trust me a bit. He said back then, all earnestly, that he truly loved me and wanted to be with me. But when it came down to the crucial moment, he dropped everything for the one he cared about. It went as far as it did, and now, 5 years have passed. What's left to say? Even till now, it's not like he belatedly realized he loved me. It's more like he wasn't content. He never loved me. Maybe he loves himself or Nina, but definitely never me. He's not content because I moved on from a failed relationship, while he never got what he wanted. He can't stand that I'm doing better. But Dave, he truly likes me. I remember when I agreed to get engaged to Dave, he smiled right away. His smile was so genuine, it made the bad news of Ken ditching the wedding less terrifying. Something about that moment. I looked at him and just felt like I could trust him. Dave suddenly got down on one knee and pulled out a ring. Thank you for choosing to be with me, Amy. Whether you believe it or not, I want to tell you, I truly like you. I'll treat you well, and you won't regret today's decision. I let him put the ring on my finger and held his hand tightly. Our engagement ceremony went smoothly, and as it was wrapping up, I finally breathed easy. Dave kept holding my hand, and I slowly started believing he genuinely liked me. Afterwards, reporters swarmed us like crazy, saying they expected it to be Ken and me, not Dave and me. Dave chuckled at them and grabbed the mic. It was always me, you guys must have gotten it wrong. Before the reporters could ask more, he added, I truly like Amy. I've liked her since we were kids, for so many years now. I hope you all give us your blessings, thank you. I'd never seen Dave so happy. So, I started falling for him too. After Betty's birthday party, Dave and I dove into running our foundation. Betty was born with pneumonia, and we almost lost her. But after 3 tough days, she pulled through. Since then, Dave and I dedicated ourselves to medical charity work, to give back and help others. There are all sorts of foundations with varying quality, so we started a new one in Betty's name focusing on helping sick kids. After the foundation's launch event, Dave and I prepped for our private interview speeches. Everything was going smoothly until Ken went online and dropped a bomb, accusing Dave of stealing his fiancée. Ken took 30 minutes to explain the marriage alliance back then and accused Dave of taking his girl. He also alleged that during Dave's pro racing years abroad, he was with over 20 different women. The scandal quickly grabbed media attention, and all the questions turned to Ken's accusations. During a 10-minute break, Dave and I went to the lounge. Dave was glued to his phone, absorbing it all. In a bit, everyone will be focused again on the mess between the 3 of us, I told him. It's all right. If it shifts attention, it might even give the foundation some publicity, Dave shrugged it off. The truth will out. I'm not scared of his rumors. Our sister-in-law blew up Dave's phone, begging us to put in a good word for Ken with the old man. Dave casually agreed. He said he would, but I knew he wouldn't really help. When I voiced this, Dave laughed. Of course not. After all he said about me, why should I help him? As I adjusted his tie, I said, honestly, I think our sister-in-law's really busy, trying to cover for Ken when he was abroad and constantly sticking up for him to the old man. Now that he's back and still won't settle down, my sister-in-law is forced to clean up his mess constantly. If I had a kid like that, I'd be driven crazy. Dave said, pulling out his phone. All right, calm down, being angry affects how you look. I joked with Dave, a husband's appearance is a wife's pride, you gotta watch out for that. Dave was satisfied and handed the phone to me. Come on, honey, finally someone can vouch for me. This was my coach back in the day, you gotta hear him clear things up, don't misunderstand me, please. I laughed and greeted Dave's former friend and coach, then halfway through, I asked Dave, want me to invite him to help you clarify things later? No need, as long as you trust me, that's all I care about. I don't give a damn what others think. I couldn't help but chuckle. After wrapping up with Dave's coach, Dave and I continued our interview with reporters. At this point, gossip about both our families was all over the internet. One entertainment reporter handed a mic to Dave. Mr. Dave, your nephew claimed you were quite the flirt in your younger years, is that true? No, Dave answered, looking straight at me as he spoke to the reporter. The person I've always loved is my wife, Amy. It's always been her and only her. What do you think is behind your nephew's claims? Dave sneered slightly. He wants what he can't have and tries to ruin what I do have. It's ridiculous. According to our sources, Miss Amy almost became Mr. Ken's fiancée back then. Do you think your marriage is an affront against Mr. Ken, considering you were once uncle and nephew? I find him laughable, Dave replied swiftly. He lost her because he's a fool. I'm with my wife because we're meant to be. At this, another reporter tossed me a mic. Miss Amy, with both families' plans, were you originally supposed to marry Mr. Ken? We did have a relationship, I admitted. But that relationship didn't work out because Ken went abroad on our engagement day to chase an ex. I wasn't about to defend Ken's remaining dignity. Does that mean you're indirectly admitting that marrying Mr. Dave felt forced? After all these years, you've never divorced, is it because of family reputations? No, it's not, I laughed and responded loudly. Back then, due to some circumstances, I chose to get engaged to Dave. To me, it just proves that family arrangements can't match destiny. Dave and I were meant to be together. Do you have any regrets about these two relationships? I was more than happy to answer that. I looked around. If I have any regrets, it's only that I didn't meet my current husband sooner. I wish it had been him from the start. I handed the mic back to the reporter. We're very much in love, ready to handle your doubts and the test of time. That's our statement. Please continue to support our foundation. Thank you all. That evening, as Dave and I were heading back, we got the news that Ken had been in a car accident. They said when the 4-car collision happened, he was listening to live radio, specifically, the interview Dave and I gave at the conference. It's unclear whether Ken intentionally caused the accident. Reports on injuries and casualties are still under investigation. Dave's epilogue. Amy always thought Betty was too lively, not like herself at all. But that's not true. Betty is almost her spitting image in looks and personality when she was a kid. Back then, I was older than Amy and Ken, so I didn't really play with them. When they were playing with Play-Doh, I was already stressing over schoolwork. I was a surprise baby for my parents, and they were quite strict with me. But ironically, they doted on the grandkids, including Ken as the eldest grandson, which kind of ticked me off. One day, I got punished for ditching school and was made to stand in the garden. Amy, like a little bunny, snuck around the bushes and eventually came up behind me. Brother, what are you doing? She was 7 then, with such a lovely nature that everyone loved teasing her for fun. Brother, do you want to play hide and seek with us? It's just me and Ken, Amy asked, handing me candy from her pocket. She was adorable. But she mentioned Ken. Ken, it's always Ken. I hated Ken the most. He'd fuss about not wanting to go to school all the time, and no one ever blamed him. I went to watch a race just once, and I got punished. Even though I finished my homework in advance before going, I'd still get beaten. After this standing punishment, I'd have to kneel in the ancestral hall tonight, and my chance to bow before the sea god might get cancelled this year. Do you like racing? I asked Amy. At her age, she nodded. Do you think it's embarrassing not to study well? No, not at all. Ken isn't good at studying either. He can't even do math. I loved hearing that. Hearing anyone badmouth Ken was music to my ears. But I couldn't resist saying, he's not good at studying. I just don't study as practice. I'm much smarter than him. Then if you're so smart, why not study well? That shut me up immediately. Because I want to become a racer in the future. But you're too young now, brother. You can learn other things first. Learning is fun. I thought about what she said internally. It seemed, maybe, she has a point. Whatever, since there's nothing else, maybe I'll stop ditching school for now. Do you go to class with Ken every day? I asked Amy, patting her head. Why is Ken so dumb? You've been playing hide and seek for so long, and he hasn't found you yet. No, Amy laughed. I don't go to school. I've never been to school. You ditch school too? I've never liked hanging out with people younger than me, so I never really paid attention to Ken and Amy's homework. From what I remember, 7 is when kids start elementary school. Because Dad worried about me getting sick, I took classes at home. A teacher would come to teach me. I later learned that Amy had a congenital heart condition, so her parents hired a private tutor to teach her at home too. Fortunately, it wasn't too serious, and with a surgery later on, she might fully recover. Her parents raised her so well. She's so lively and outgoing, never shy, and greets everyone confidently. You're the first one to openly support my racing career. Even if you don't really get what racing is, I really appreciate it. In the future, when I become a professional racer, I'll invite you to watch me race. Alright, thanks, big brother. I was about to tease her more when Ken's voice came from nearby. Amy, where are you? I can't find you. Please come out. Trouble. Ken, come over here. I'm with your uncle. Amy waved at him. That kid's so stubborn. He walked up and turned his head away. Humph. No way I'm calling him uncle. He's young enough to be a brother. I'm not gonna call him uncle. Already talking back at this age, huh? What did your grandpa teach you? I didn't want to spoil the little brat. Humph. Ken made a face at me. If you keep being mean, I'll tell Grandpa and let him punish you. And if you go to another car race, I'll tell Grandpa, and he won't let you eat. Great, every word he said pushed my buttons. He's like a little tyrant, always messing with everyone in the family. But since he's the youngest, everyone sides with him. Whenever we argued, my parents only asked why I didn't give in to him. It's funny. I'm barely older than him, yet I'm expected to yield. I believe in respecting the young, but I didn't see him respecting his elders, though I'm not even old. At 15, I went to Switzerland for high school on my own. Later, I went to the UK for professional racing training. By 19, I started making a name for myself and signed with a popular racing team. Right after winning my first major award, I hopped online to post a picture of me just off the racetrack, with the caption, "This is just the beginning." This post made me stand out in my social circle, leading to some playful teasing from friends. People called me beginner. Even not so quick Ken dared to comment that I just got lucky. It was laughable. I wished I could go back home and knock some sense into him. Thankfully, Amy is a sweetheart. She reached out to me immediately. Wow. Dave, you're so awesome. I knew you could do it. Oh, by the way, I've had my heart surgery done, and it won't affect my exams. Great. I replied quickly. She's always been my biggest cheerleader, both back then and now. Later, as she grew up, she started calling me uncle too, just like Ken, making it feel like there's a huge age gap between us. She was close with Ken as a kid and still is. You could say they've been childhood sweethearts. I'll admit, I feel a bit jealous. I told a close friend about this, and he laughed his head off, spreading it around the next day. Now I have another nickname, Jealous Guy. I said, apart from Amy, there are no good people in the world. As time went on, I experienced failures and successes and became a professional racer with significant commercial value, winning numerous honors. When I heard about the two families wanting to merge, I flew home that night. Predictably, my dad picked Ken. He has always been the favored one. I can let him have everything else, but not this. It's not fair. At that time, I had just been disciplined and was kneeling in the ancestral hall. We're not that far apart in age, why Ken and not me? They've grown up together since they were kids, they said. Everyone thinks they're perfect. Why wedge yourself in? I argued that if this is a family alliance, why can't I be considered? I won't accept the family's arrangement. Dad was almost helpless in the end. You can fuss over other things, but not this one. Ken's always been right in your eyes, always good, and you've always been proud of him. I got angrier. You've spoiled him since we were kids, always indulging him, making him both pretentious and useless. He doesn't deserve Amy. He's your big brother's son, Dad snapped, getting mad. Your brother passed early, leaving Ken without a father. Shouldn't we spoil him a bit? In the end, Dad made the final decision. It's settled. There's no use complaining. Don't you have a race or something? Go back and book your flight. Can't I at least see her get engaged? Stop it. There's a generational gap between you two. Ken's a good kid. Don't hold so many grudges against him. I stood up. Why don't I see him as a good kid? Never seen him stop dating at school. He's young, he likes having fun, maybe it's all a misunderstanding. When he finally gives you a nasty surprise, don't say I didn't warn you. Dad tapped his cane on my shoulder. Nonsense, Ken's always been obedient and sensible. I know him better than you. Turns out, the obedient and sensible Ken gave him a real surprise. He ran away from the engagement. Dad sent a bunch of people to find him, but not one bodyguard could. He must have planned it all out, booking tickets and cutting off all contact. Everyone was worried, except me. I took out the custom ring I'd ordered abroad long ago. This ring had been sitting there for so long, waiting for its chance. I felt it was time to fight for myself. Why should Ken get the chance and not me? He gave it up himself, so he didn't deserve it. I'm going to hold on tight to my happiness.